Welcome back, everyone, to the Shannon Joy Show. My next guest is the David Knight. He broadcasts live every day from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Time, right before the Shannon Joy Show. I'm a huge fangirl, like many of you, of David Knight. Have been following his work for many, many years. He did decades of great work reporting. He worked for InfoWars and famously lost his position at InfoWars under Alex Jones when he dared to stand up and speak out about the truth regarding the COVID-19 lockdowns and what happened during Operation Warp Speed, along with what went down on J6. He now has his own independent platform. He's broadcasting with his son every day, which is amazing. He's just battled a major health issue, but he is back and he is with us. And I cannot believe I haven't been able to get you on the show yet, David Knight. It is so great to see you. Welcome to the Shannon Joy Show. I cannot wait to hear about what you think regarding the news of the day. Welcome, David Knight. Can you hear me?
Okay, I got you now. Yeah, I got you now.
You got me. Okay, so you didn't hear my intro? I was really buttering you up with the intro. Come on.
Well, that's really kind of you. Thank you. I'm sure it's more than I deserve.
Oh, stop. You look great. And I'm such a big fan of yours. You are one of the clearest, most concise voices out there of truth regarding so many of the lies that we're seeing, the left and the right, mainstream news media, right-wing news media. You are a consistent voice. This is why I followed you for so many years. And I'm so glad that you're doing well, that you are back from your health troubles. And I must ask, before we get started, because everyone in this audience, the Shannon Joy Show audience, loves you. They love you, and they have been asking about you. How are you doing? How is your health? And so I don't want to impose too much, but we would love to just hear about, how you've been, how you're feeling, and what you're doing with the show and what people can expect.
Well, thank you. It's been about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months now since this all happened. I had a couple of what I think were TIAs, just temporary strokes, but they came one after the other, one day apart. And the second one was worse. So they took me to the hospital and they thought that I needed to have my carotid artery cleaned out. So we did that, and I probably shouldn't have done that because that created a lot more problems. That caused me to have a full stroke. And it also affected the nerve on my tongue, the hypoglossal nerve, and as well as my vocal cords. So it took me some time to recover. I came out of that. I couldn't do anything with my left side, and I couldn't talk, so didn't know if I was going to be able to do this or not. Fortunately, my sons, after I had the first TIAs, they jumped in and did the show. I knew they could do it all these years because we've worked together. Travis has been my producer for a long time, and of course, we always talk about the news anyway. So I knew they had as good insights as I did on things that were there. So they did the show for a couple of months. And then I got to the point where I could talk, and it's just gradually getting better. We had a lot of people who were praying for us and letting us know they were praying. So just thank God for that. And it's been, like I said, kind of like the sunrise gradually coming up. You know, you don't realize in most cases, although I would say just in the last day or so, I've noticed a big improvement in my ability to walk. I've been pretty unstable since then. I've actually had a fall once because of it. But I told my doctors, how you doing? I said, well, I've kind of got this Frankenstein walk. You know, it's really stiff and tenuous and flat-footed and all the rest of this stuff. But I was actually walking a little bit more normally the last 24 hours, my wife noticed. And so things like that are starting to come back.
Oh, well, we are praying for you, and we've been praying for you. You are such a needed voice of reason, independent, not right, not left, calling balls and strikes, and mocking the absurdity of the news cycle today. Necessarily.
It is like dark comedy, isn't it? Yeah.
It's
it is really
the
strange.
worst. It's the worst. Let's get your overall thoughts of, umbrella view, what's going on here in the country. We have the war drums beating, the meeting with Netanyahu, threatening Russia with dropping nukes, but also in this address today at Quantico with hundreds of
Mm-hmm.
military leaders, Donald Trump talking much less about excursions by the military abroad and much more about deploying the military in the interior of the United States of America in a variety of different ways, using a variety of different mechanisms, executive orders, emergency declarations, legislation, you name it. So let's start
Isn't that amazing?
there. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, it was James Madison who said instruments of tyranny abroad, instruments of war abroad become weapons of tyranny at home, right? And
Yeah,
that's what we're seeing. They've been trending this way for a very long time. Digital ID is also a big part of this. I mean, I talked about the Swiss just voluntarily put that chain on themselves. Of all people, the
right,
Swiss always valued privacy, so dark time in Switzerland. It's not just dark chocolate
yeah,
that's coming out of there, but it's like even the
right,
Swiss don't value their privacy, and they want an ID, and I see that all through the interactions of people that we've seen for the longest time. Neither the left nor the right seems to appreciate how important the First Amendment is in free speech, because I see that on both sides. Everybody wants to cancel the other person, and
hmm,
all these threats, and that's really the background for why the timing is right for the establishment to do what Trump is pushing right now, which is a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. There's a reason that we don't want to have the military doing law enforcement. I said for the longest time that we're too highly militarized with the police as it is. If you look at the number of police officers we would have like the third largest army after our regular army and the Chinese. We would be like number 3 with our police. So I think that we're too much of a police state by far. And I think it's interesting to see Trump resorting back to the drug war for everything. Remember, he
yeah,
first started complaining about Canada being a source of fentanyl, and that was absurd. But
mm,
now he is also pushing against Venezuela, and they are not a source of fentanyl either. As a matter of fact, the UN and other people have said over the years they've done more than any of the other countries in Latin America to try to shut that kind of stuff down, but they don't generate the fentanyl, and they have pushed back against other forms of drugs. But understand that the whole war on drugs thing, and like, I don't use drugs, I don't drink, I don't do any of that stuff. I don't need the government to keep me from doing that. It's really a spiritual issue. And
hmm,
that's why we're having so many shootings, I think, and so many other problems in our country, is because we don't have that spiritual foundation that is there. But if you go back and look at our history of prohibition, when we had alcohol prohibition, they put in the 18th Amendment because they had respect for the Constitution at that time. That gave
hmm,
them the power to prohibit alcohol, which they do not have under the Constitution. And then the 21st Amendment made it legal again to nullify the 18th Amendment. Well, they had the war on drugs without ever doing anything to the Constitution. So the whole war on drugs has been unconstitutional from the very beginning. And by the way, it was a UN agenda. I didn't realize this for a very, very long time until I interviewed some people from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and they pointed out that the schedule, the 4 different categories that they put drugs in, that all came from the UN. So this was not Richard Nixon's thing. And I remember when they
hmm,
started legalizing marijuana in California, the UN was outrageous about it. And I thought, what is their business in all of this? Well, I didn't realize at the time that they were the ones who are really behind this. This is another UN agenda that is out there. So the war on drugs has given us things like civil asset forfeiture, where they can confiscate property without ever even charging you with a crime, let alone convicting you of a crime. We've got
horrifying.
the SWAT team raids, no-knock raids, and all this other kind of stuff. One abuse after the other. And of course, we saw bits and pieces of that during alcohol prohibition. It corrupted police, it corrupted the courts, it gave us more intense forms of alcohol. It was a total failure. And now we have these drug cartels, as Trump is talking about, designating them as terrorist organizations and getting an authorization for the use of force. That was something that was put in by um, Corey, I'm trying to remember the guy's name, a representative out of Florida. He put an expanded authorization for the use of military force. As somebody pointed out, these drug cartels are so interwoven in so many countries that they have a presence. That's how much they have grown, that we could wind
Hmm,
up having an authorization to go to war with about 60 or 70 different countries, because they
my
have
word.
the tentacles of this organized crime that we've given a monopoly on this black market to, have grown so much. And yeah, I think that may be really what this is all about when you look at this strange meeting that is there. It's very concerning.
It was a strange meeting. He mentioned dropping nukes on Russia. Doesn't want to do
Mhm.
it, David. Does But if he has to do
Yeah,
it, he's
let's
going to
talk
do it.
about it.
He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to drop those nukes, but if he does, if he has to do it, he's going to do it. Right? He also
Yeah.
referred to them as central casting. Did you pick up on that part of his speech? It was the very beginning, and he welcomed all of the military brass, and it was
I
a
haven't seen
strange
a
speech.
speech yet.
Yeah, there wasn't any applause. I mean, it was a very
Mhm.
quiet audience.
Mhm.
But at the very beginning, he's like, "Yeah, I got to loosen you all up." He's like, "Yeah, this is great. Central casting right here." And I thought that was odd. Am I reading into things too much with that? Because the title
Well,
of
I
the
think there's a
Today
lot of
Show,
theatrics.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there definitely is. You know, it was interesting before this happened, Barry McCaffrey, who was, I think it was Obama, no, it was Clinton's drug czar, something, had something to do with the drug war. And he was talking about this, and he said, talking about how unprecedented this was. And he said, it's going to be a strange audience because they are not going to spontaneously clap unless they've been told to. It's what he was saying. So I guess they weren't told. But he said they typically just sat there in a quietly, orderly way to do this. But
Yeah.
it is a very, very unusual thing. But we are in strange times. And I think I keep coming back to the fourth turning. Strauss and Howe, who gave us the different labels of millennial and all the rest of the stuff. Everybody uses their generational labels, but nobody talks
Mhm.
about the greater context of that. Nobody will talk about fourth turning, even though they're all about Generation X, Y, Z, and millennials, and you name it, the boomers and everything. They don't talk about their fundamental premise, which they wrote about in the early 90s. They said sometime in the mid 2000s, we will hit what they called a fourth turning. They call it that because about every fourth generation, they would have a major restructuring of society. They saw this pattern going back for 500 years in American and British history. And as they pointed out,
Mhm.
we are now globally synced. So we're all on that same cycle. And they said that the fourth turnings are always accompanied by some kind of an economic unrest and
Yep.
then usually by war. And so they said sometime in the mid 2000s we'll probably have a global economic crisis. Yeah, that happened, and that
Mhm.
would kick off a fourth turning that would culminate sometime around 2029. And of course, it's interesting because the UN and all these globalist organizations want to talk about their UN 2030 plan. That's when they want to have their
Right.
new dystopian society in place. And the previous fourth turning that we had was World War II and the Great Depression. Prior to that, the Civil War. Prior to that, the Revolutionary War. So this is very concerning. This is a very important time that we're living in right now. And I've been talking about this for quite some time. And I would always say, I think this fourth turning is going to be a combination of the three. I think it's going to be a
Mhm.
civil war, revolutionary war, and a world war. And I think it's going to be happening in a lot of different countries at the same time.
Wow. Wow.
You know, a lot of people don't
Psychological
realize,
warfare. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of people, I'll just say one more thing. The Civil War, we're always told that Civil War was about slavery, and I think that that's a misreading of it. At exactly the same time we had our Civil War, 1861 to 65, there was a civil war in Italy at the same time. And what was
Hmm.
happening at that time that was the bigger picture rather than slavery, because they didn't have slavery in their rural society in Italy, you had the consolidation of regional agrarian powers into an industrial nation state. That was happening in
Mhm.
Italy, it was happening in Germany, it was happening in a lot of other places. And that's the bigger picture of what was happening with the Civil War. Prior to that,
Right.
we almost broke up in the 1830s with a nullification crisis over tariffs. But that didn't happen because the timing wasn't right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
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 So they had a
Well,
taco moment. They took the tariffs off.
well, because as everyone knows, tariffs are taxes.
That's
but
right. That's right.
but Republicans don't know this anymore, and fiscal
Isn't that
conservatives
amazing?
don't know this anymore. No one gets that. It's. I mean, we had
Yeah.
major tariff action from Donald Trump overnight, just dumping new tariffs on upholstered furniture, kitchen cabinetry, pharmaceutical products. Now, as the pharmaceutical companies raise prices and they skyrocket, Trump swoops in now with a public private partnership with
Hmm.
Pfizer, of all the pharmaceutical corporations, called Trump RX. It's apparently an online clearinghouse
Trump
where
are
people can
us.
go. Yeah, yeah. Trump
She called
RX, where
drugs
you can,
are us. Yeah, that's it.
well,
That's
and I
drugs
said,
are the U.S.
yeah, this whole thing with him designating these terror organizations or these organizations as terrorists because they poison the American people with fentanyl. Yeah, that's really bad. But you know
Hmm.
who else
Hmm.
poisoned the American people? Donald Trump
Hmm.
with
That's right.
Operation Warp Speed and
Yeah,
the
even worse.
bioweapon that was the
Even worse.
mRNA shot. Even
Yeah.
worse. I mean, impacting millions more
Hmm.
babies, pregnant women, elderly people. I mean, the mass poisoning, as Catherine Austin Fitts so succinctly describes it, is at the hands of Donald Trump. I mean,
Yes.
he is the father of that bioweapon, the kill shot.
That's right.
The
International war
economy,
criminal, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, it's
yeah,
interesting. Charlie Sheen has been on this, movie and book tour and stuff, talking about his life and how everything went down the drain. He said the worst thing that ever happened to him, of all the drugs and things that he got involved in, was crack cocaine. What he didn't
huh?
talk about is the fact that that was created by our own government in order to fund the Central American wars that they were running illegally. They created crack cocaine. They ran it through Freeway Ricky Ross and throughout the rest of the country then after that. But that's when we talk about the war on drugs and the phony aspect of it, that's something that we always need to keep in mind. But
Yeah,
when you look at how Trump has been the go-to person for the establishment to get their agenda through, because he puts the conservatives to sleep, just like on the tariffs. How could they
mhm,
not see that that is a tax? Well, conservatives have always understood that you can't tax corporations. Corporations are either going to pass that tax along or they're going to go broke. They don't have these massive, with a few exceptions. I mean, pharmaceutical companies do, but most businesses and corporations don't have a large enough profit margin that they can absorb these massive taxes. They're going to have to pass it along. But they just forgot about all of that stuff and they don't care about it. And as you pointed out, he says, I'm going to help the furniture industry in North Carolina. We used to live in North Carolina, and I don't know if that's going to come back or not. But this is different now. What he's doing with that is different than when he began. When he began, if you notice, it was all about this country and that country. And you had that reciprocal tariff nonsense that was put together by Peter Navarro, who he didn't have. It was a ridiculous formula that he used. I forget what it was, but it was had nothing to do with the tax rates from these other countries. What Trump was doing at the beginning was he was trying to create conflict between the United States and all these other countries. And he did a really good job of that. Always in the past, tariffs would be done either to protect a particular industry, which is what he's doing at this point in time, starting to do that, or it was done at the time of Jefferson, the early part of the Republic. It was enough to pay for the government. And he could eliminate all internal forms of taxation, just fund the
right.
government that was small enough to fit in the Constitution. He could fund it with tariffs. But Trump's position on this, I was complaining about that from the very beginning. I said, this makes no sense. He's not going to run the government off of this, and he can't, and he's not protecting any particular industries in general. He's just going after this country and that country to intimidate them and to create conflict. I think that is his role. I think he's there to create a
Mm.
world war. I think he's there to create conflict.
Well, I don't see any benefit to this. To your point, I remember sparring with Trump humpers over the tariffs
Mm-hmm.
regarding, whether or not they were taxes. And they actually believed that he was going to get rid of the income tax. I'm like,
I
you
know.
guys, like they believe, which he never did. So the tariffs have
Well, he
not
was saying at the
replaced.
same time, we're going to make these tax cuts permanent, right? If he's going to make the tax cut permanent, then the income tax is going to be there as well. For he's not getting rid of it.
Exactly.
It's
Well, and the
crazy.
other problem, and this is what I think is what is uniquely dangerous about our economic situation today in the United States of America. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you did not have a now decades long building of collaboration between BRICS nations. So you have
Mm-hmm.
Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they've been building supply lines, the Silk Road Initiative, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They have been building up trade relationships, and partnerships. And even 10 years ago, a tariff strategy might have worked, right? Because they didn't have
Mm-hmm.
supply lines set up or those relationships built. But now they're
Mm-hmm.
simply saying, okay, you're going to impose tariffs. screw you, United States of America. We don't need you anymore. We can
That's
build our
right.
own supply lines. We can enter into our own trade agreements, and you guys can go pound salt. And we're seeing that happen. Are you seeing the same thing? And in that vein, I also think that is where we are very vulnerable with the dollar. You know, it used to be they
Hmm.
could devalue our dollar and our currency ad not over and over and over, and it didn't matter because our dollar was the world reserve currency, and we just got to cheat because no one had anything else to play with. But
That's right.
now, with them beginning, embarking on a metals strategy, gold and silver, and also strengthening up their own currencies and their own collaborations, you could see them say, I feel like I could really see them saying, you know what? Screw the dollar. We don't want it anymore. And they could actually do that. I'm not saying that's good. I'm not rooting for Russia and
Right.
China. I'm just saying that it's there and it seems way more viable than that I've ever noticed. What are your thoughts on that uh, part of
Well, I
analysis
said it
regarding
was a
our?
mistake from the very beginning when Biden did
Yeah,
it, when he weaponized the financial system for sanctions against Russia. And right away, Russia was able to continue to sell their oil. They sold it at a huge discount as long as people would pay them in hard currency of gold or in the Russian ruble. So that was the beginning of them getting out of the American system. And then with America seizing their financial assets that were in the Western system, and of course the EU as well, they showed that the system was not reliable. Now we're starting to see some of the same stuff happening now, even broader with Trump. He's promising more sanctions. And I was just talking today about NVIDIA and how the
mm,
CEO of NVIDIA was saying that the Chinese, we've kind of awakened a sleeping giant there with AI because Trump has put an embargo on the NVIDIA chips. So guess what? They're going to make their own. And
mm,
just like, we're going to put an embargo on them with our financial system, well, they'll make a different financial system. This is what happens with this when you use these kinds of tactics. And I don't think it's going to work. But the worst thing is, excuse me, the worst thing is the inconsistency about it. The fact that you've got one person who's making all of this tax policy. That should not be the case. And of
right.
course, the Supreme Court's going to be hearing that to see whether or not he can do that. And I think that I hope that they're going to strike it down. I think legally they need to strike that down. We do not want to have one person making the unilateral autocratic decisions about what the tax policy is going to be and the rate of the taxes are going to be. And in addition to that, because he has shown, I think, by his actions, one of the best arguments against one person doing that, because he's always on again, off again. He has
Right.
just changed his course over and over again. That in and of itself is more destructive than the actual tax rates. If you just did it once and left it alone, people could make their plans and their decisions, but it's just frozen so many different businesses. I had a guy on, as a matter of fact, as well, when we look at the rare earth stuff. And they said, well, it's not that they're rare. It's just that you've got to have the right kind of refining equipment. So we're putting that together, but it's 5 years before we're going to be able to get there. So Trump just cuts us off from that. And some of the
Mm,
recent tariffs that he's put on have been for material that is used for American manufacturers to get things made. They can't find it in America. And so what's happened is that we've had this infrastructure that has become dependent on China. And you can't just pull us off of that all at once without doing massive economic damage to American manufacturers. This could be the final nail in the coffin for American manufacturing, the way that he is moving ahead on this.
It just seems like body blow after body blow after body
Yeah.
blow to this
Yeah.
economy, which is already fragile, already unstable, and it's am- amazing for me to watch analysis on right-wing news
Hmm.
outlets who are calling this a golden era economy when people they see their grocery prices, they see the fact that their children can't buy homes because real estate
Right.
inflation, healthcare inflation, energy inflation, every major um, aspect of the American economy is in an inflationary period from what I've been able
Hmm.
to look at. We're going to go to break. and we're going to take a quick commercial break. And then when we come back, I do want to ask you first and foremost about Trump's golden age and how you see the economy. I mean, you are interfacing with your audience every day. You're doing, a daily 3-hour show looking at all of these metrics. And I'd love to get your perspective on that, and then move
Sure.
into what we can do, because I think you're right. It is inevitable. The fourth turning analysis, I think, is spot on. I think this is cyclical. The only thing I would differ in is I think, they trace it back 500 years of American and British history. I would trace it back 5,000 years. If you read the Old Testament and the New Testament, man, you see the cyclical nature of all of this, right? It's the same story.
They even used
playing out.
those names. They had like the Moses generation and the Joshua generation and
Right.
their theory. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the only area where I would kind of expand upon your thesis here. I also, though, believe that Christians will use this, and this is another area I want to go with you in the next segment. You get a lot of the prophets and the doomsday prophecies and the end of the world, Armageddon. It's the worst time ever. And even analysis from Trump humping MAGA prophets saying that even if Trump is the Antichrist, like they think he's like the second coming of Jesus, but even if he is the Antichrist, they love it. And he's the winner because he'll, I kid you not, usher in the coming back of Jesus Christ and the end of the world.
Yeah.
So we're getting into weird cult spaces here. And this is why I think a sound, again, the Shannon Joy, my show is not a religious show, but when I see people bastardizing the Bible and scripture and really engaging in what I think to be just full scale heresy and posing as prophets, pastors, and Christians, I sometimes you have to call foul and address it. So I would love to do that with you. I don't think there's a better person actually to address it with than you, David. So we'll go there when we come back. If you're good, can I keep you around for another 20, 30 minutes? Okay. I don't want to overstay my welcome, but I just could talk to you for a really long time. I know you had 3 hours, but okay. Excellent. All right, guys, we're going to go to a quick break. We'll be back with the David Knight. Make sure that you follow him on Twitter. His handle is @LibertyArian. And you can also support him and find all of his work at www.thedavidknightshow.com. That's
actually, we've got an easier one to remember now, Shannon. DavidKnight.news. So they go to DavidKnight.news. That's easier.
They can get everything.
We shortened it up.
DavidKnight.news, and that's Knight with a KNIGHT. Don't forget that. All right.
That's right.
We'll be back with David in just a moment. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. Keep it tuned right here. One of the missions here at the Shannon Joy Show is to stay healthy. We need to be as naturally healthy as humanly possible so that we can stay out of the medical industrial complex. We don't want to be on pharmaceutical products. We don't want our bodies to be susceptible to viruses or anything that they are subjecting us to. We don't want to have to rely on the medical industrial complex or pharmaceutical companies in order to exist and survive. And that means daily, like a lifestyle of healthy living and getting the nutrients that we need. And as you guys know, collagen is a regular part of my daily routine for health. It's also now a part of my husband, devastatingly handsome Dr. Joy's daily routine as well. And this is because it is known as the crucial building block for your bones, your joints, muscles, tendons, and ligaments, as well as your skin, hair, and nails. So as we age, we just stop producing. We don't stop producing collagen, but it really slows down. You need to put it back in your body. And this is why daily collagen is so very important. And my favorite collagen, of course, is Native Path Collagen. Why? Because it is the best. It is the cleanest. It is 100% grass-fed bovine collagen, So no plant-based anything here. It has one ingredient, nothing else is added. It's hydrolyzed collagen, which is the best kind. It dissolves perfectly into any liquid, hot or cold. It's that clean. It has only the types 1 and 3 collagens. And as I mentioned, it's sourced only from very, very happy cows, happy, grass-fed, free-range bovine cows. So no marine, egg, or chicken sources at all. It is also the lowest cost on the market per serving with a 365-day money-back guarantee. You will not get better collagen for a lower price point than you will with Native Path, but you have to go to my site, which is getnativepathcollagen.com/joy. That is getnativepathcollagen.com/joy for 45% off. And yes, 95 day? What did I say? 65 day, 365-day money back guarantee. You can send them back empty containers if you don't like it, but you're going to love it. So make sure you get your discount today. Go to getnativepathcollagen.com/joy. Welcome back, everyone, to the Shannon Joy Show. No, Rothan Walker, I see you on the live chat, on the Rumble chat. There are no non-bovine cows. I love my Native Path collagen every single morning. I love my collagen. I love my hydrate. I've been using them like for so long. The best products out there, Native Path products, the best at the best price points. That's why I do use the collagen and the hydrate every single day. I do want to talk to you before we get to David Knight, though, another amazing sponsor of the Shannon Joy Show, Blood Flow 7 from Juvenon. I don't know if you guys have seen the headlines. There has been so much in terms of studies regarding nitric oxide. And in terms of cardiovascular health, right now, like we're dealing with the turbo cancers. There's so many health impacts from the rollout of the bioweapons. The bioweapons, the mRNA shots are still in the market. Pharmaceutical corporations are still not liable, and people are still getting sick and getting poisoned. So it's manifesting in a lot of ways, but we know one of the very first ways that we saw the injury manifest was through myocarditis, pericarditis, and heart conditions. And this is something that Dr. Peter McCullough was talking about very, very early on. It was also something that was very evident in the preclinical trials that we saw, and even the animal trials that were conducted on mRNA technologies, 5, 6, 7 years before the rollout of the COVID shots. So in the terms of cardiovascular impact, for those of you who have taken the vaccines or believe that you may have had COVID and that impacted you, there's a lot out right now about nitric oxide and your cardiovascular health. And here are just a few. There's a new study from the University of Exeter. It found that drinking nitrate-rich beetroot juice lowered blood pressure in older adults. And the effect was attributed to reshaping what they call the oral microbiome, which led to more efficient conversion of dietary nitrates into nitric oxide, a molecule that helps to relax and widen your blood vessels. So this makes it easier for your blood to flow through your entire system. And as we know, that blood flow helps to bring oxygen, critical amounts of oxygen, to all of your organs, your lungs, your brain, your heart, you name it, right? And another research study in March of 2025, there was an article in Men's Health that reaffirmed nitric oxide's role in improving cardiovascular health by promoting what is called vasodilation, which increases blood flow and lowers blood pressure. So it is critical that your blood is flowing. And this product, Blood Flow 7 from Juvenon, is one that is frankly amazing. It's a daily supplement and patented formula that works by boosting your body's nitric oxide levels by up to, get this, 230%. It opens your arteries up 62% to improve blood flow throughout your body. So this means you're getting more oxygen and nutrients to your brain, your heart, and your muscles, and even places that need a little extra help as you age. Yes, it's also anti-aging, which you guys know, I'm always a sucker for the anti-aging as I get older and older. So it has S7 botanical complex and nitrosazine, which helps to boost nitric oxide production. It also has trans resveratrol to support healthy blood flow, and bioperine, so your body actually absorbs it, unlike most of the off-the-shelf stuff that barely even moves the needle. So right now, you can get 25% off plus free shipping plus a money-back guarantee by going to bloodflow7.com/Shannon. That is bloodflow7.com/Shannon. There is no risk. You can send back the empty bottles if you don't like it. You'll get the 25% off and also the free shipping. But if you or a loved one, your spouse, your mom, your dad, your kids, if they have been suffering from any type of cardiovascular impact from the COVID shots or COVID-19 itself, this is something that you guys are going to want to check out. So again, bloodflow7.com/Shannon. That is bloodflow7.com/Shannon. Thank you to our friends over at Juvenon for sponsoring the show. And please make sure to patronize the Shannon Joy Show sponsors, because we couldn't bring you all of this without all of them. So if you're in the market for any of their products or services, make sure that you use our URLs, you use the Joy promo codes, you let them know that I sent you, and that way we can deliver a nice return on investment for our advertising partners and keep this little train chugging right along. So without further ado, let's bring back our friend David Knight. He is the host of the David Knight Show. Go to davidknight.news to get all of his broadcasts. He is live every day, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. David Knight, welcome back into the studio. So glad that you're with us today.
I was just listening to you talking about the nitric oxide and the beet stuff. I got to say, I take that, and it has made a huge difference. It's been one of the supplements that I have noticed the most difference in. I mean it. It has really improved my blood pressure quite a bit. So I heartily endorse that in general. That's not the brand that I take, but that's fine. I think that you get a good one, and it's going to make a big difference in your health, I think.
There's a lot on nitric oxide too. I mean, it's a very exciting new kind of area that they are expanding. And again, as I mentioned, Catherine Austin Fitts, the great poisoning, we still haven't addressed that massive elephant in the room. And people are suffering from just so many heart issues, cancers. It's like you really do have to start looking at your health. I mean, for me, it's kind of like
come by mine naturally. It ran in my family, and I'm pretty old, so. But it's great for any of that kind of stuff. My philosophy is, if something isn't going to hurt me, I'll give it a try. And so I've tried a lot of things, and I got to say that was one of the things I could notice an immediate. I felt better, but we could see it with the blood pressure issue. So I totally recommend it. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thanks so much for that. Before we get to the economy, we're going to start with the golden age economy and whether or not you think we're in a golden era. But one of the live chatters, and I actually think this is important, even though you have told this story on our show before, but one of the live chatters asked if you could kind of recap your exit from InfoWars again, because that's something that actually makes you very unique as a presenter. And, as through my analysis, I've just seen such damage coming from right-wing news media and, platforms like InfoWars under Alex Jones, such a mangling of the truth and a defense of Trump to the exclusion of what is actually true and what is actually conservatism or constitutionalism, which is what we thought this movement was built on all along. Like the departure from that in right-wing news media, I think is one of the most tragic things and has made this movement so vulnerable to the progressivism and the leftism of Donald Trump. So I thought maybe if you could, because this is an audience request, recap that and give us your perspective on right-wing media and the influencer class today before we get into the economy, and then also the manipulation of Christianity and scripture to kind of push a lot of this Trump stuff. If you could, that'd be great. Yeah.
Well, in the last month or so, I've seen a lot of stuff from Free Thought Project as well as from David Icke, talking about, Alex, what are you doing? I mean, you did 4 documentaries about the police state, right? And you've always, in the past, been against war, but now that Trump wants to go to war in Venezuela, that's right. That's where we won all of our wars. Let's go to Latin America again. Let's win another one, type of thing. And cheering on the police state movements that Trump is making here. And that was not the way it was at InfoWars when I first went there in 2012. And it was after Trump came along that Alex had never been partisan before. And he became rabidly partisan with Trump. And I just was not interested in that. And I looked at Trump in his first term. I said, okay, yeah, I'll support Trump over Hillary, lesser of two evils. As Julian Assange said, we know what Hillary Clinton is. We know that she's a warmonger and a criminal. We don't know what Trump is yet. So let's give that a try. Well, my assessment of him through the first 3 years was that it's kind of a typical Republican administration where they deliver slightly on some of the promises. I thought he was good in terms of some of the movements that he made on pushing back against the climate MacGuffin, but he could have done a lot more. And, his tax programs and things like that, he could have done a better job of that. But all right, so he's kind of just typical Republican until 2020 hit. When 2020 hit, I saw it for what it was. 2020 was the pandemic was the other shoe of 9/11. It was the other shoe of the police surveillance state to drop on us. And remember that they did the first one of these germ games 2 months before 9/11. And then the week after, they had an anthrax attack, which was a false flag. And then 2 months later, they put out model legislation to all the states so that they could enact this without getting into conflict with the 10th Amendment. And so Trump's role was to put in a pharmaceutical executive there at HHS who, right after Trump got back from the World Economic Forum in January of 2020, you had Alex Azar declare a pandemic emergency, when at that point they'd only claimed that there'd been 6 people that had been infected with COVID. How could that be a pandemic? 6 people in the United States? But he made that assessment. And then when Trump did his emergency executive order on that Friday the 13th in March, that released the money. And the money is how you control everything. That's the other argument that I always have with the MAGA people. Trump didn't do it. It was a bad Democrat governors. And it's like, well, we had a lot of bad Republican governors as well. Both the Republican governors and the Democrat governors were given cash by Trump. That's why he declared an emergency for the most part. It's like when there's a natural emergency. Yeah, he funded it. So, the responsibility is with Trump. The buck stops there. Remember that sign on Harry Truman's desk? But the financial buck started with him. He financed it. He bribed and, blackmailed people with that money to do what he wanted to do. So we had an issue with that. And towards the end of the year, after the election, Alex started pushing this Stop the Steal stuff. And I knew it was a grift because you even had Roger Stone was filmed by the people that were following him around doing a documentary. He said, this is going to be so easy. It'd be like falling off a log to make money off of this stuff. And so I knew it was a grift. And we had some arguments because he wanted to come on my program constantly. I had a morning program there, and he typically didn't do that. And I didn't want to have the interruptions, especially to push the Trump stuff. And so we had arguments about that. And then when we got to December 14th, that was the day that they had the electoral votes tallied and made it official. And so I told everybody, I said, okay, this is what could have happened. They could have taken it to the state legislatures and for these states where they had razor thin margins, and they could have made the case about why the votes were not there. And if they would have done that, they could have had a legal fight. They could have had the under the executive branch in each of the states, you have the Board of Elections, and they made their determination that Biden had won. But I said you could have taken the case to the state legislatures that were under Republican control. If they made the case that they thought that Trump had won, then you would have 2 legitimate competing slate of electors, and you would then have people would have a choice. As Thomas Massey said, they didn't give us anything to work with. They've only got 1 slate of electors from each state. So I said, it isn't going to happen. And I said, at this point, Stop the Steal is nothing but a grift, and you better be careful when you go because it's going to be a trap. And I said that, and he fired me 3 days later and came up with a whole bunch of different reasons for why he fired me. I said at the time, I said, he's got more reasons for firing me than Hillary Clinton has got explanations for Benghazi. And these all started coming
Wow.
back up again just in the last month or so when Owen Schroyer left. He started
Yes.
complaining about me again. And so that's why I would bring it up because of that. But, when I even said, and it's on record publicly, the morning of January the 6th, that was a Wednesday, I said they didn't do anything at all to try to win the elections in Georgia. We all this lockdown
That's right.
election and vote by mail stuff. They didn't change any of
That's
that,
right.
and that was a
That's right.
Republican state with a Republican legislature. They did nothing. Everybody's just focused on stop the steal. And so I said, so what they did yesterday on that Tuesday, they just turned over the Senate to the Democrats. And I said, and don't go today. If you're there, get out of there because it's going to be a trap. They're going to have agent provocateurs. They're going to set you up and they're going to use this
Mhm.
to harangue the entire conservative movement, which is what they did.
And you have been proven right. Hundreds of FBI, it's now confirmed, were
Mm-hmm.
on the ground on January 6th. And what you're explaining here is essentially a money making operation by Roger
Yeah.
Stone and Alex Jones
Mm-hmm.
to draw their people, lure
That's right.
their followers and their listeners and their viewers to Washington, D.C. to be trapped by
Yep.
FBI and agent provocateurs. And it actually ended in the horrifying treatment of hundreds of J6 prisoners who were locked up and abandoned, by the way, by Donald Trump for almost 3
Mm-hmm.
years. No
He
one
could have
mentioned that.
preemptively pardoned them. He could have preemptively
Yeah,
pardoned them. The Insurrection Act that is there, when that was passed at the end of the Civil War, it was an act of retribution. They wanted to get even with the Confederates. But the president at the time who succeeded Lincoln, Johnson, didn't want to continue to let that fester. So what he did was he issued a blanket pardon to the people who actually had, in their view, committed an insurrection and were still
right.
there. The bill. This was not an insurrection. Nobody showed up with any guns or anything. So
No.
it was something that could be done. You can pardon people before they are charged with things, as we saw Biden do. He did that for his son, other people. But so he left them twisting in the wind. And Shannon, I have interviewed, I think, 3 or 4 people who, after they were pardoned, I got out, and I talked to them, and to a person, they would not blame Trump for what happened. It's crazy. They got everybody focused on Ray Epps and on the FBI
Yeah.
agent provocateurs and other things like that, which is all legitimate, fine. But they didn't focus on the Judas goats who got them there. And the thing
That's right.
is, the election was on Tuesday. By Thursday, InfoWars had Steve Pachenik on, and he was talking about the sting. And he said, it's all okay. We planned all of this, and we have blockchain watermarked ballots that are being processed by quantum computing, and we know who all the people are, and we've got 20,000 National Guard units out there right now arresting people. This was all a sting that Trump put together. And Alex kept having him on again and again and again. And every time he had him on, as a matter of fact, that Friday, when I heard that on Thursday night, I tweeted out and said, this is not true. This is absolute nonsense. He's just throwing a bunch of technical jargon against the wall to see what sticks. And then I began my program on that Friday to push back against that. And that continued. I was told that I would be fired if
Wow.
I didn't stop that. And Steve Pachenik had told Alex to fire me. Of course, Steve Pachenik is a guy who's been deeply in the intelligence agencies. He was Henry Kissinger's guy for Operation Gladio, and they sent Steve Pachenik to Italy after the Italian Prime Minister Aldo Moro was kidnapped. And it was after he left that they executed Aldo Moro. And the
Oh
Italian
my God.
government did an investigation. They said it was because Pachenik had ordered it because he realized that Aldo Moro knew that it was a NATO operation. It was Operation Gladio was a NATO false flag operation where they pretended to be Marxist terrorists in Italy and in Germany as well.
Oh my word. I
So
mean,
it
these are,
gets
yeah.
I guess the
These are big things. I mean, but so, listen, guys, David Knight, the man that Alex Jones fired for actually reporting the truth. Really, you could become known as the man who has exposed Alex Jones, really, for the grifter that he is. And he has just simply descended, in my opinion, since you left the organization. I love that you stood up. You had a lot to lose in that time. And rather than submitting and engaging in the grift, you stood up and he fired you. But now here you are, independent and better than ever, and able to say whatever you believe, whatever you actually believe to be true from your own independent platform, which is just amazing. I wish more conservatives would realize that they don't have to be on the grifting gravy train. I'm glad that Owen Schroyer, I don't even watch that guy. I don't know who he is. I don't know if I agree with him on everything or nothing at all, but I'm glad that he's off that reservation and on some type of path towards independence, right?
Well, that's the thing, it was, like I said, when I went there in 2012, by the time we got to 2015 and Trump, Alex had turned 180 degrees away from everything he'd always supported. He had always been about liberty, against the police state. He had always been nonpartisan. And just to see that change. But then what happened to us in 2020 was just beyond the pale. And I was told by people who called me up and said, Alex is telling people that the Trump vaccine is not the bad vaccine. He's putting out a vaccine that is going to be okay. The Bill Gates vaccine is the bad one. I couldn't even believe that. And I didn't hear that until just about 2 years ago. And somebody sent me a clip that they posted up, that had been up on social media. And Alex actually ran a commercial talking about that. And then he did a live talk about it, and he told people, he said, it's just dead or inactive viruses that are there. And of course, you're just going to throw in a little bit of mercury and aluminum, but you can take that because it's basically sugar water. And it's like, come on, Alex, you've been telling people for decades about the mercury and the aluminum in the vaccines and how that in of itself is bad. But this is mRNA. Come on, what are you doing with this stuff? So, I mean, he would do anything for Trump. It's amazing.
It is. Absolutely. It is absolutely amazing. People forget that Alex Jones, that all of them, because March of 2020, I was 100% full scale anti-lockdown. I didn't know anything, but I knew enough to know that it was all a complete scam and that all roads were going to lead to forced vaccination, because I had been reporting on vaccines for years. But I'm telling you, Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, Fox News, talk radio, all of them for 3 to 4 critical months bought the whole thing hook, line, and sinker. They regurgitated Anthony Fauci. They regurgitated Catherine Burks. Donald Trump handed over his administration to the bad guys when we actually know now it was a DOD operation, right? There was a military operation and deployment of a bioweapon against we the people. That's the other big elephant in the room. But if any of them had spoken up at any moment about the truth, they might have saved members of their audiences who needed the truth about the vaccines, needed to know you can't bring a vaccine safely to market in 3 months or 6 months. Of course not. You can't ignore the animal studies that had been conducted on mRNA technologies a decade prior with the early coronavirus vaccines. All of the evidence that we had about fraud during the Pfizer trials, like the early reports of, from the vaccine adverse event reporting system and the vSafe data and everything that if we could figure out we didn't have any, information at our disposal, but if we could figure it out, man, imagine if the right-wing media, instead of continuing with their Trump worship, the cult worship of this guy, with Alex Jones at the helm, man, millions of people could have been saved. We probably would have been out of lockdown in 2 weeks. Yeah.
That's right. If you look at Dark Winter, that was precisely what they were saying. They said, look, there's some kind of a biological event. Maybe it's a leak, maybe it's a bioweapon, but either way, this is some plague that is out there. We got to lock everybody down until we can get a vaccine rushed to market. And they practiced that germ game for 20 years. Every year they would do that. And it was a bunch of people in the CIA, Anthony Fauci, the usual suspects, right? So I say. So it was, the first one was called Dark Winter. And I got to say that I had, there's a guy that I got who's a source, and he's a cybersecurity expert. And he contacted me and he said, there's a lot of chatter about Dark Winter. And he told me that about 6 to 9 months before this happened. And it's like, I guess I'm kind of a biological. That was always in the back of my mind. This is Dark Winter 2, right?
Yeah.
This is when they're actually going to activate Dark Winter. And that's what it was. And, it was just horrific betrayal of the American
Well,
people.
and because
Everybody who's in power.
the continued betrayal, because
Yes,
if we had truth tellers on the right, then we would have a reckoning. That elephant in the room would be exposed. And we have had nothing, absolutely
yes,
no reform whatsoever, not even an acknowledgement of the millions upon millions of vaccine injured and dead in this country. And that is a
that's right.
damn shame. That is,
That's right.
these same people who screamed about, Biden's vaccine and the coercion and all the things when it was convenient for them because Trump wasn't in office. And now they just
Hmm.
retreat back to their talking points and do the bidding of their savior. It's a protection racket that they run for this guy. It drives me crazy,
Yes,
David Knight. So I'm thankful for you.
that's crazy.
Let's
Yeah. And I
speaking of
had just today. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, just today I talked about a guy who's a Swiss doctor, a cardiologist. They put him in an insane asylum because he blew the whistle on this stuff early on. It's absolutely crazy. This is a guy who was in private practice for 25 years, and he's out there talking medically about what he sees. And the politicians put him in an insane asylum, like it's Stalin's Russia or something. But that's the key. As you point out, all these different commentators, both the so-called left and the so-called right of the mainstream media, but you see it in every country. Everybody was doing the same thing, and it didn't matter whether they were some leftist socialist or were they supposed to be a conservative. Trump is doing the same thing as Trudeau in Canada. They were all doing exactly the same thing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just such a betrayal. It's absolutely
It
amazing.
really is.
I would
It
suggest, I
really
don't know if you've had them on or not, but Sam Bailey and her husband out of New Zealand, she's a physician, and so's her husband. They wrote a good book
okay.
called The Last Pandemic. And that I
Ooh,
would
okay.
recommend that to people. It's going to get you to question virology, everything about virology.
Wow. I've been wanting to get someone on that topic
Yeah.
specifically. So thank you for that
Yes.
recommendation. Speaking
Yes.
of the protection racket, we also now have right wing media pundits who call themselves free market capitalists and believers of the free markets. They now lying to their audience on a daily basis about the Trump's golden age economy. What do you
Hmm.
make of the economy right now, David? And where do you see things going? Because from my perspective, it's just, as I mentioned in the last segment, one body blow after another from this administration, impacting regular people much, much worse than the
Oh
trillionaire
yeah.
and billionaire class that's being created. What are
Well,
your
yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah. Even when we talk about the tariffs, the people who are going to be put out of business aren't going to be the big guys. It's the small people who had a manufacturing operation they can't get supplies in, or they were doing reselling of stuff and they can't order because they don't know what the tariffs are going to be. They don't, Trump jacked things up over 100% at one point in time for China. So everybody's like, what is going on with this? That kind of uncertainty kills small and medium sized businesses, just like he killed them with the lockdown in 2020. The big guys were
Mm-hmm.
okay, but the small mom and pop stores on Main Street were put out of business. I don't see it as a golden era. I see it as a golden error. ERROR. I think this is one gigantic mistake, and it is the worst part about all this. I think, Shannon, is, and we see it in the economic aspects, but we see it in other areas as well. Trump's mode of government couldn't be further in opposition to the Constitution. Every time he wants to do something, what does he do? He declares an emergency. And then he
Yep.
says, and now because it's an emergency, I can do whatever I want. I'm hoping that the Supreme Court slaps him down hard. They
Yeah,
couldn't slap
me
him
too.
down hard enough, in my opinion. They couldn't slap him down as hard as I'd like to slap him down for doing that kind of thing. But that's a very
Absolutely.
dangerous thing. And it was, 4 years ago when Biden was doing a lot of executive orders, everybody was complaining about it on the conservative side. But then when Trump swamps what Biden did in both the number and the extent and the importance of executive orders, they cheer. Look at this, we're winning. We're not winning if we're going to throw away the rule of law. That's the key thing.
Do you think an economic impact event is imminent? And if so, how soon do you think it happen?
An economic impact, yes. Well, when you look at the massive debt that we've got, and nothing is being done to fix that, they're not going to cut the spending anywhere on anything,
Mhm.
and it's still being used just for political purposes. For example, we can give $9 billion to Harvard. Why don't we just stop that altogether? I know that some of that is research grants, but still, it is insane the amount of money that we're subsidizing these colleges for, and they really truly are seminaries of Satan. So why are we
Mhm.
doing that? But they'll continue to do that. The only thing that they'll do is they'll carve it back a little bit and say, well, don't criticize Israel or we'll take some money away from you. But then if
Mm.
they stop doing that, they'll give them all the money back again. And so we see that same sort of thing happening with Chicago and New York and one California city, who have said, no, we're going to still put men in women's sports. And so the Trump administration is saying, see, we're going to pull back tens of millions of dollars from you because you're doing that. And they said, fine. Well, the problem is that the government, again, should not be funding education whatsoever. There ought to be a separation between government and education, for the same reason that we don't want to have an official state church. We don't want to have
Right.
them running the education, because that really is where they are instilling these bad values into kids and gaslighting them into this transgender stuff and all the rest of this. So we want to have a separation from the state from education. Instead, what they do is they continue to fund this and then pretend that they're fighting against the trannies when they're not really fighting against them. They still can have their transgender stuff in their classrooms. Just don't put a male and a female's sports. That's all they're talking about. And even Bruce Gender said that he didn't like that, but he wants to continue pushing the tranny agenda. So it's
Unbelievable.
it's moderate and it's light. What they're trying to do, they're trying to pander a little bit to the Christians, and they're trying to pander to women by getting men out of women's sports, and that's all it is,
Mhm.
really. It's a head fake.
Yeah, and in terms of the economy too, I think the separation of church and or of state and corporation. I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
the
And that's what we're
expansion
seeing, a big
of
merger now, aren't we? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, big merger. Yeah, these investments into Intel and everything like that. That is, we do not want the government involved, in, especially the government under Trump, because
Yeah.
he's bankrupted half a dozen casinos. If you can't run a casino profitably, you might as well just hang it up and get out of business, I think.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's the definition of fascism. It's the coming together of the
Yeah,
corporate state
it is.
and, the state. And what Biden used to do in the shadows, Trump is normalizing. That's what's really
That's right.
breathtaking to me is just how
That's right.
brazen. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to go into business with Pfizer." "Hey,
Hmm.
no one buy Tylenol anymore." Like that's a business whether you like Tylenol or not. Like it's a business. Like
And that
when
whole
does
thing
it's a
is a head fake too, I think,
I
to say
think
that
so too.
Tylenol is the cause of the autism epidemic. Come on, think about that.
Yeah.
Autism has gone up. What it was, I forget the stats or something, but forget how many, like 30, 50 times or something like that. And the
Oh gosh,
amount of
yeah.
Tylenol
Yeah.
use has doubled, so how does that work? Okay. That just doesn't even pass a sniff test. You know what they're doing?
Mm.
They're trying to still pander to the vaccine companies by throwing Tylenol out there. Yeah, it's got its risks to your liver and other things like
Yeah.
that, but I don't think it's the major cause or the sole cause of autism as they're trying to put it out there.
Oh,
It's none of
absolutely.
these
Peter
fakes.
McCullough, Dr. Peter McCullough agrees with you 100%. He came out day of, literally 20 minutes after the press conference and said, listen,
Hmm.
if there's any type of correlation between Tylenol and autism, it's because the child gets vaccinated. They have a
Yeah,
vaccine injury, inflammation of the brain, encephalitis, or
that's right.
another reaction. And then the doctors tell them to take Tylenol,
Yeah.
which makes it worse, right? So
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
progression. McCullough was very clear in a tweet right after that. I know it's I mean, they just throw in, it's distractionary. It is to dissemble and to create chaos away from the actual truth, which is why I didn't think that press conference was, worthy of a Nobel Prize. I didn't think it was as groundbreaking
That's
as
right.
people thought, because I think it just
That's right.
injected more chaos and more confusion into the discussion. We only have about 5 minutes left, David Knight, and I wanted to ask you about the manipulation of Christians and the use
Hmm.
of religious rhetoric and prophets very political prophets who are all over social media. They're all over the podcasting space, basically, engaging in political discourse, but wrapping it in religious rhetoric, to the point where
Mm-hmm.
some on the right are even praising Trump if he happens to
Oh,
be
yeah.
the Antichrist, because then at least Trump is going to usher in the coming back of Jesus Christ and Armageddon and the end of the. I kid you not. Like, this
Yeah,
is the
that
stuff that
whole
I'm saying.
eschatology thing has been really dangerous for Christians, hasn't it? Well, I've talked about a lot of these people. Remember, they were all over the place in 2020, the election. They were saying Trump is coming. He's going to be reinstalled and all the rest of this stuff. And they
Yeah.
had deadlines for when it was going to happen. They weren't saying he's coming back in 2024. And
Right.
they were all proven wrong again and again. People like Julie Green. We talk about them being prophets. I think you spell that with an
Mm-hmm.
I. That's what that's really about. But
So as I was saying
yeah,
that,
we
I'm
have
thinking of Julie Green in my mind. I'm glad that you said her
yeah,
name. I didn't want to,
yeah,
but like, she's one where I'm just like, oh my, and she gets millions of views and people quote her back to me. It's crazy.
yeah. Listen, my children, thus saith the Lord, she says. And you know what? When a prophet said, thus saith the Lord, and it didn't come true, you know what they did to them, right? They drag them out of the
Right.
camp.
That's
But
right.
anyway, when you look at that, I just got to say, go with the simple stuff. People get caught up in all these prophecy charts and all the rest of the stuff we just had. September 23rd was going to be the day of the rapture from some of these people. They get caught up in all this stuff and they miss the main thing. God has told us, do not call evil good. You cannot side with Israel on genocide and then say that it's excused because they get to do whatever they want because they call themselves Israel. And that's
Right.
the key thing. If that's what your eschatology is telling you, then you need to go back and look at the fundamentals and look at the fact that you're calling evil good and get back to the main thing. I just had an article I talked about today where there were two different sides. The biggest pro-life organizations that are out there do not preach the gospel to people. There's a few people that do that, and they get very upset if somebody shows up with a speaker and starts talking about the gospel. They're at an abortion center, and they said that's not the way we want to do it. We want to be relational, and we want to do all the rest of the stuff. One guy said, I did that with him for a while. And he said, I would see people come back. We would talk to them, encourage them to go to a crisis pregnancy center. They would go there. And he said, the final straw was a couple comes back and they'd had an ultrasound. And the guy takes a picture of the ultrasound and puts it on Facebook as they're going in to kill the baby. And he said, at that point, I realized this is not a knowledge thing. This is, you can't approach this from a psychological thing. He said, this is a heart issue. They need the
Yeah.
gospel. They need to have a relationship with God. That's going to change the way they view these things. And we're not going to get through to them otherwise. And, I just look at it and it's like, we have to understand that it's not enough to be pro-life. We got to be pro-eternal life. And
Yeah.
so, whenever we push the real gospel off to the side because we got a political agenda, that's the same thing that these people are doing. And they mean well. They're trying to save a baby's life. But
Right.
what happens if the mother and the baby aren't Christians, right? Eternally, what happens to them? What profit is there in doing that? And we got a lot of fake people out there who are doing this kind of stuff. I've played so many times the clip from General Flynn, who goes to this Reawaken America thing, and he's leading people.
Mm.
Somebody did a clip of this woman. Her name was Claire Prophet, back in the 1980s, and she's praying to ascended masters and all this other kind of stuff. And they juxtaposed it. He plagiarized this prayer. He's there with the Reawakening America people in a
Yep.
church building, and they're all got their eyes closed and they're repeating after him everything that he's saying. And what he is doing is repeating verbatim what Elizabeth Clare Prophet did in the 1980s. And she was not a Christian at all. And so people have to understand how this religion thing is being used. You go back and you look at Turning Point. 4 years ago, you had Sink Uyghur, the Young Turks. I call them Stink Uyghur, the Young Turds, but
Yeah.
they were criticizing. They're criticizing Turning Point. They said they got 501c3 status. That's only supposed to be for churches or people who don't do any political stuff. Don't tell me that Turning Point is not a political organization. So there's that
Oh,
type of thing that is there all the time. Sometimes they will throw in religion so they can bolster the 501(c)(3) tax status that's there.
yeah. No, it's highly deceptive. I've seen the General Flynn video, and it was like a
Mm-hmm.
pagan prayer to false gods. It was New
Yes.
Age. That woman that he quoted, I think that she was. I mean, people likened her to like a prophetess or a witch or something. So it's
Mm-hmm.
all
Mm-hmm.
very strange
She was
and
New
dark.
Age. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
She
absolutely
had
New
this
Age.
apocalyptic cult that she was running at the time. Yes. And,
Yeah,
Flynn also was pushing the transgender stuff at the very beginning. Remember the guy, I think his name was Chris Beck, and he was a Navy
yeah.
SEAL, big guy, and he was a tranny. They made him a tranny. And so he detransitioned about a year or so ago. And he was saying, they really pressured me in the Pentagon into doing this. And he goes, and if they can pressure me, an adult
Hmm.
Navy SEAL, think what they can do to the kids in the school. We got to stop this. And he was speaking out. Well, in 2015, just as they were kicking off the training stuff, you had General Flynn who did and I've got the picture, I snapped it and saved it and I put it up all the time. He was honoring this guy, Christopher Beck, who called himself Chris Beck, I think, like a female name. He was honoring him on their Pride Month at the Pentagon. It was their second annual Pride Month. And you had Michael Flynn pushing transgenderism at that point.
Oh my word. I'm not surprised. I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised at all. Well, and
Yeah.
remember, going back to the scripture, anyone who tries to speak of the apocalypse or the coming back of Jesus Christ, every generation believes that it's their generation. Christ said that. And when
Mm-hmm.
they asked
Mm-hmm.
him, they said, "Hey, Jesus, when is the end of the world going to come? When is God going to come back?" And he said, and no one knows. I don't
That's
know.
right.
Only the Father knows. So if Jesus
That's right.
Christ himself said that he didn't know, imagine, every single time you hear a prophet or prophetess come in and say that because of the
Mm-hmm.
signs and the numbers and all of these different things, that it's the end times. They do that to keep you apathetic and I think not engaging in action, and
I
among
think
other
it is
things.
satanic. It's not just to keep us from spreading the gospel or trying to make our community closer to discipling of Christ. It's also the sort of thing that nobody knows when they're going to
Right.
die, right? You or I could die later
Right.
today. We don't know that. We never know that. So it's almost this mentality that, well, okay, I'm not going to die until Christ comes back. And I think a lot of people are cheering for something bad to happen, hoping that
Right.
that's going to bring this all to an end, and that way they don't have to die. But the reality is that
Mhm.
tomorrow is not promised to any of us, and no one
Mm,
knows when their life is going to end or when Christ is going to come back. That's the way that we need to live our
absolutely.
lives. Yeah.
I agree with you, David. I have heard so many times people say, "Oh, well, Jesus is coming back, so I'm going to be fine." When the betrayal gets too obvious, they say, "Oh, well, then it must be end times. Jesus is going to come back." And they think that they're going to be raptured
Right.
up and they're going to be, and that is not from the Lord. We are so
That's
late,
right.
but I didn't want to let you go. And I appreciate you so much, David Knight. Thank you for
Well, thank
everything
you,
that you
Shannon.
continue
It's
to
great to
do.
talk to you.
Yeah. And you're great kids, guys. David is on every day, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Make sure you go to davidknight.news. That's davidknight.news and follow him on Twitter. It's at Libertary or Liberty Arian. And that is linked in the show notes. David,
Libertarian. Yes, liberty. Well, you can find all the
Libertarian.
links at David Knight News. It shows you where you can find the program as well.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
that's good. Make
Thank you.
sure
You take
you're.
care, my friend. You have to come in again.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for having me on.
All right.
Always appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you. And sorry
Bye
about
bye.
that. If it seemed like I was talking over David a little bit, we had a slight delay in our audience or in our audio. So we were, a little bit behind each other. So I apologize for that. We'll see if we can get that fixed for the next couple shows. But amazing, amazing truth teller. I cannot recommend someone enough for news and analysis every single day. 3 hours. If you're going to listen to someone, turn off the talk radio, turn off Alex Jones, turn off Fox News. All right. And go to someone who actually lost something, who's, for standing up and telling the truth and maintaining credibility, not right or left. He's nonpartisan, but he's just looking at this world through the lens that so many of you are looking at. And I really cannot respect him enough. David Knight is the man. Marky Mark NJ. Fidgety Guy, thank you so much for posting up David Knight's website, thedavidknightshow.com or davidknight.news. Zen Woman, LT Oracle of Truth, you guys are great. Great to see you on the live chat. Make sure you give us a thumbs up. Share this with everyone you know. Those of you watching on Twitter or on the Died Suddenly site, please give us a comment and a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for being with us today. Thank you to our sponsors, Colonial Metals Group, the Satellite Phone Store, Don Polano over at PCM and Associates, PCMPolano.com is his website. He's my financial advisor. He's been my financial advisor for like 2 decades. And he's opening up his practice to all of you. He's got an 800 number right up there on his website. If you want a financial advisor that shares your values, go to PCMPolano.com. That's PCMPolano.com. Of course, our friends over at Blood Flow 7, Juvenon, and Vive Biotics. Everything is in the show notes of the Shannon Joy Show. Please help keep this show running by patronizing our sponsors. If you're in the market for their goods or services, it helps us keep the lights on here at the Shannon Joy Show. David Leach, the Strident Conservative, thank you for being with us. And this is going to be our exit quote of the show. David Leach, another great David out there, Strident Conservative. He's a great source of news and information. He said there's a book in 1988 titled 88 Reasons Why Jesus is Coming Back in 1988. When that didn't happen, it's released again in 1989 with 89 reasons that Jesus is coming back in 1989 and probably 1990, 91, 92, 93, 94. Every generation has the grifters. And just remember the truth. Even Jesus Christ himself said he didn't know. So if any prophet tries to tell you that they know, then, well, they're talking right out of their ass. And that's all I have to say about that. All right. Thank you guys for being with us today on the Shannon Joy Show. We'll be back tomorrow to do it all again. Have a great day.